get going. Welcome, everybody, and a big welcome to Terry, who's going to talk to us today on the theme From Kings to Gardeners. And I hope many of us have had quite a bit of experience in our lifetimes at some time or another of gardening. I'm sure a few of us had the experience of being kings in that sense, but it's a fascinating topic. Terry describes himself as a former engineer, management consultant, academic, and now what I really like is his description of himself as an elder storyteller. So he's going to take us on a journey today, a story about AI, ethics, and what it means to be human in this world that we are in today. So without more ado, I shall hand over to Terry to introduce himself and to get us going. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Ian. So can everybody see that? I'm hoping you can see a title for the screen which says From Kings to Gardeners, Rethinking AI, Ethics and the Human Place in a Becoming World. Just a word or two about my background. I'm really very, very excited to be invited to talk to you today. I've long been an admirer of E.F. Schumacher. I liked his Small is Beautiful, and I supported intermediate technology during the 1970s and 80s, and I was very impressed by his Guide to the Perplexed. My own background is in business management and in theology. I have a lot of experience in business management, but I was in the 60s accepted by the church as an ordinand, and I went through the full training. Didn't go ahead with my ordination, but I've been spending the time since 1960-61 to the present doing my best to reconcile my experience of spirituality as an important aspect of life with my scientific training and knowledge of the works of science, particularly systems thinking and complexity science, as an aid to making sense of the world. So that gives you a sense of where the three rivers of life, spirituality and science finally come together 60 or 70 years down the road. That's what brings me to what I'm saying. And I've really done the work that lies behind what I'm doing since 2019, when I went on a Camino to Santiago. And since then, I found myself intensively working on the field of sustainability from those three viewpoints that I told you about. Now, why is my... Oh, there we are. I'm going to have to do it that way. In fact, the theme of what I want to talk about today is almost entirely around this quote of Gregory Bateson's. Steps to an Ecology of Mind was a very influential book for me in the 1970s. And I think that was probably my first introduction to systems thinking, although I've done a lot of work in conjunction with the UK Systems Society, and in the field of soft systems. I was an early adopter of Peter Checkland's soft systems method, and through him I became familiar with the work of Sir Geoffrey Vickers, and through him I became familiar with the work of John Dewey. So systems thinking and the topic of regulation has been never very far away from my mind. 10 days ago, a week ago last Thursday, I presented these thoughts at a workshop in a symposium at Christ Church, University, Canterbury, on spirituality and sustainability, as a result of which a lot of what I'm going to say, I've now been invited to contribute as an academic chapter for a book by Springer called the Handbook of Sustainability and Spirituality. But I am convinced that Bateson's one sentence there, that the major problems in the world are the result of the difference between how nature works and how people think, has a great depth of truth, and that's what my paper will basically be about how the world works, about how people think, about the gap between the two, and about what the implications are for the mess that we're managing to make of the world that we live in at the moment. So I think my first question to you all is, where at the moment do you notice that gap in your own life or your own work? Don't be shy.
Um,
Or is
right.
Bateson wrong?
Anybody want to actually come in at that point? Um,
I will move on. I don't depend upon you all to provide
wait a minute, John.
I,
John, please go ahead, John.
sorry, I was trying to find a way to frame this. I don't. I agree entirely with Bateson's statement here. But I think it's this problem is evident absolutely everywhere. So it's impossible. For me, it's impossible not to see it. I think that most people have a very poor mental model of the environment they're trying to navigate. And I often think that the terminology they tend to use can be misleading, as if not just just unhelpful. So I'm not saying much here. Basically, I'm just agreeing with you, I think.
Good. It's a good
I
start.
there's a word I avoid though. I'm not personally I'm not comfortable with words like spirituality.
Yes.
I they I never know quite what people mean by them. I think that
I,
they can muddy the water somewhat. Nevertheless, I think I understand what you mean by it in this context. Time will tell.
yeah, and it will. I guess another way of you saying that is, I mean, the contemplative tradition. I mean the history going back for 3,000 years of different contemplative traditions who make unprovable claims about their experiences, but if you take the body of their experiences together, it cannot be ignored. And submerging it all with a worldview that believes that science is the only route to truth is part of the difference between the way nature works and the way people think. So I understand the difficulty, and I'm not using it as a cop out, and neither am I using it as a disguised way of sneaking religion into the story, but I'm talking about an area of human experience may be encompassed by intuition and imagination that is not susceptible to science or reason in the usual way.
Thanks, thanks, John. Kate, did you want to say anything? Kate? No, she's frozen, I think. Terry, the
I,
thought for me was that Bateson uses the word difference there. Whenever I see the word difference, I think there's a boundary. And that means that there's always a boundary between nature and us. And it's sort of working with that boundary and trying to maybe dissolve it is the thing that we should be trying to do. Yeah.
I don't have any difficulty with that. I'm very aware of how we humans are very prone to creating false binaries everywhere, and an either or, and this and that, and an us and them, and a black and white, and a day and night, and whatever else. We have binaries all over the place, and I'm not using difference to mean a binary. I'm
No.
using difference to mean a distinction, a different way of looking at an alternative. If you imagine a diamond, a multifaceted diamond, by a difference, I mean looking through different facets of the diamond at the same reality.
Yeah. Karen?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on your observation, Ian. I mean, I, again, quite often sort of jump in when people talk about nature because I think that does separate us. I see humans as being part of nature. We just don't recognise it. But I'm sure Terry, I think, has already started to address that. So
I will definitely be saying things about that.
Thanks.
Let me move on a little then, because I'm really going to be saying three things, and you could call what I'm going to say, if you had to give it a name, I think it would be the theory of cosmic self-regulation, and with a sub part of it which you could call the consciousness trap. And I'm going to be arguing and giving you some evidence for, but there is a huge amount of evidence that the world works through nested self-regulation. Evolution is punctuated. There is continuous evolution, but there are punctuations where thresholds are crossed, and when the threshold has been crossed, the new state that applies is regulated by the state from which it emerged. I'll explain much more about what I mean about that. If I had to put my whole thesis in one sentence, I think it would be that everything in nature has limits except us. And that is what creates the distinction between us and the remainder of nature. You could summarize it as human supremacy, as human exceptionalism, as a particular type of intelligence. And I'm going to distinguish between, when I talk about intelligence, I'm not talking about consciousness or awareness. I'm talking about something that Hans Kahneman, Daniel Kahneman, described as operating with memory in a way that is appropriate to the circumstances at the moment. So it's about responding to changing situations in a way that makes use of memory. And I'm going to be arguing that our task is to realign thought within life's own rhythms. And I've got a picture of trees there because a key cornerstone in my understanding of what's going on, or the way I look at the world, was when I read a book published in 2016. I only read it about 6 months ago, but even less maybe. A book by a Canadian called Suzanne Simard, and the book is called Finding the Mother Tree. And Suzanne is a brave researcher operating in the Canadian forestry world. She is from 4 generations of Canadian loggers, so where it comes to trees, she knows what she's talking about, but she is a thoroughgoing scientist who has conducted numerous experiments on the way that forests work, and within the forestry, the way different species of tree and other plants work to maintain the integrity of a forest. I'll tell you more about that, but that made me, if you like, that provided a link between ecological regulation and biological regulation. So that's the general area. Let me ask then a more specific question about this. Let me jump into the first part of that, how the world works. And I'm laying my cards on the table saying that with the exceptions of human beings, I think that all the systems you will find are living systems that have some form of self-regulation involved in them. And my question is, can you think of the last time you saw any kind of living system regulating itself? And how did it do it?
The last time you saw a living system regulating itself? Yeah. Well, I was in the garden earlier today, pulling out some weeds and clearing up a bit, as you do at this time of year when it all starting to die down. Kate, any thoughts? Kate, there we go. Kate, can you hear us? Yeah, we've you're breaking up very much. We can't quite hear you, I'm afraid. Um, we have yes, we can't get. No, we can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Maybe type your question in the chat, Kate,
Yeah,
and we can read it there.
yeah, it's a good idea. Anybody else got any
Or your
thoughts?
observation.
Observation?
You can hear.
Jake, have you got any thoughts there?
Yeah, I can. Very good connection.
No, sorry, Kate, we can't get that.
That is a lovely quotation, a lovely example. If you're not looking at the chat,
Yeah.
Kate says that this year we had loads of aphids in the garden, and then loads of ladybirds started appearing to correct the unbalance in the system. Ladybirds eat aphids. In fact, earlier this year, at the end of June, I was at a wonderful conference called a festival called the Realization Festival in St Giles House in Dorset. And at one point, we went out looking at the number of beetles there are in the grass, and every time we found ladybirds, we carried them off to the older trees which are being grown on the estate, and rehoused the ladybirds in the vicinity of the aphids that were attacking the older trees, and did our little bit for ecological balance. Let me perhaps go on to explain a little. Have any of you read Suzanne Simard's book, or one of the other books about the amazing ecology of forests? Old growth forests are absolutely staggering, amazing systems. The trees communicate with each other, both the same species and other species, through a network of fungus mycelia and a kind of coating called a hyphae, HYPHAE, that coats the tree roots and enables the mycelia from the fungus to communicate directly with tree roots. So in much the same way as the brain transmits neurochemicals from synapse to synapse, mycelial and mycorrhizal networks in a forest transfer nutrients and communicate with chemicals, information from tree to tree. So, for example, different species like birch trees and pine trees will share nutrients and water with each other in different seasons because they each have different seasonal requirements for them. And not from Susan Simard directly, but from another researcher in the forestry area, if there is an attack of caterpillars demolishing leaves on birch trees at one end of the forest, then in a very short time, birch trees at the other end of the forest start developing caterpillar chemicals to make their leaves unattractive to the caterpillars that are eating them. And you have to say, if you regard intelligence as being based on memory and based on an ability to react to changing circumstances, you have to say that forests as ecosystems are demonstrating a kind of intelligence. So I thought, well, what happens if we separate the concept of intelligence from the concept of consciousness? Let's just start looking at intelligence as that ability, independently of whether we're talking about things that are conscious or not. And what you find is that everything in the universe behaves intelligently. The science of thermodynamics shows that at the basic level, even going back to when we simply have particles and helium gas moving in the universe, there is an intelligent clumping that enables the next level of evolution to emerge. And research that got Ilya Prigogine his Nobel Prize in 1977 showed that dissipative intelligence is what enables clusters of particles and gases to clump together to form galaxies within the universe, helped by the force of gravity. But this dissipative intelligence still goes on in the Earth today. Waves are dissipative structures. Whirlwinds are dissipative structures. Forest fires are dissipative structures. They take energy, they create a temporary structure using that energy, and that temporary structure lasts for as long as there is a sufficient supply of energy to feed it. Whirlpools in a river, going down the river, you see there's a structure there that persists until there is no longer any energy available to feed that particular structure. So, and yet the structure itself is governed by the laws of thermodynamics, which don't allow any of the behavior of dissipative structures to break outside the boundaries set by the thermodynamic intelligence that governs the way the universe is. 4.3 billion years ago on Earth, a particular form of dissipative structure was developed that we know as life. We know it as the living cell. And this living cell evolved new ways of maintaining temporary structure by developing the ability to create its own energy, and in what they call autopoietic systems, to use energy to create a structure, and they maintain that structure. They turn the energy is used in two ways. It's used partly to maintain the structure of life and partly to feed the life and enable it to do the work that it does in order to survive. So you now have a new kind of intelligence, which you could call biological intelligence. And because life lives on inert matter, there is the kind of intelligence I've been talking about with forests, which is ecological intelligence, and the kind of wonders that I was describing about old age forests. But ecological structure, our bodies are dissipative structures made up of living cells. And like all living cells, death is a part of life. We can only contain the energy for a certain amount of time, and although it's a lot longer than a forest fire or a dissipative structure, and we live an awful lot longer than mayflies or butterflies, nevertheless all life has a limited time during which it can maintain its structure. Trees do a much better job than we do. They last for up to 1,000 years, but still there comes a time when every tree that has ever lived will die. So we've got a range of intelligences developing, and each one is regulated by the intelligence of the kind of structure from which it emerged. And then about 50,000 years ago, and we don't know precisely when, a species emerged that had a different kind of intelligence from any of the others. We first see this in structures like, and I always say this wrongly, Götepe-Tekle in Turkey, where long before the agricultural revolution, you've got humans working together to create structured entities, huge stone structures with carvings on them that show that we're beginning to represent real events in abstract representations. So I call it symbolic intelligence because it allows us to represent the real world in symbolic form. And by the time you get to the invention of language and number in about 5,000 years ago in the Sumerian region, the land between the rivers and between the Tigris and Euphrates, where the first civilizations develop, you start to get writing by pressing sharpened wood into clay and baking the clay, and cuneiform writing and numbers both emerge in symbolic form. And if you've read Harari's Sapiens, you'll know that over time these symbols became language, language became stories, stories became abstraction, and human symbolic intelligence extracted the symbolic world from the real world that it emerged from and started working on symbolic intelligence, divorced from its roots. And I'll talk about that later. And now, of course, we've gone one stage further, and we've developed artificial intelligence, which, although it is inert, it knows more language than any of us do, and it is better and faster at pattern recognition than our symbolic intelligence is, although it completely lacks a basis in embodiment as we do. So we not only now have a problem with the way Gregory Bateson said the problem is the distinction between the way humans think and the way nature works. You've now got the problem between the way AI, quotes, thinks and humans think and the way the rest of nature works. So this, I think, is a way of thinking about life that gives us a chance to start to tackle some of the deep-rooted problems that lie behind what Gregory Bateson said. And I'll pause at that point for any questions or comments. I can substantiate every one of these statements. I've prepared a paper for publication that will work through that has about 70 or 80 references supporting each of these claims that I'm making. It's well established scientifically, everything I'm saying here. Either I've lost you or I've stunned you.
Terry, I'm reminded of a simple little concept for systems, which was that there are some systems which are reactive. They just immediately come into that sort of phase of doing something because something else has happened. There are then systems that are responsive, that have a range of options, and they select one. And then the level after that is purposeful, where they're actually not just responding, they are deciding what to do deliberately. And I was wondering whether that layers onto these sort of systems, these 6 levels that you've got here. Which
I think it covers the first 3 of them, Ian. I think the primary ones, they're responsive, they're reactive. Yeah. The dissipative ones, they're responsive because a forest fire will go looking for further sources of energy. It doesn't just stay put, it goes searching for for its energy. And by the time you get to biological, even primitive amoeba have got flagellae and can move by reading nutrient gradients. They can move towards food and away from things that sound as if they might eat them or threaten them in some way.
Yes. It's that whole concept of purpose that I think is really important, that sort of starts to emerge from that sort of symbolic intelligence and now artificial intelligence. Where is purposefulness?
Well, even biological, I believe, Verena and Maturana, if you accept and there's a great deal of science behind this, if you accept the concept of autopoiesis, then every living cell has has its own implicit purpose of prolonging its life. Everything. So it's an intrinsic rather than extrinsic purpose, but once you get to the biological level, you are getting purpose, if not intentional purpose. I'm not arguing that I don't believe in pan conscience. I don't believe that everything is conscious. I think that consciousness emerges at level 5. And I do think sentience emerges at level 3.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. Jake, you've got your hand up there.
Actually, maybe not at this point. Thanks.
Oh. Okay.
Does this lay a basis that it bearing in mind Gregory Bateson's quotation, the problems arise in the difference between life works and the way people think. This is all about the way life works. So we're happy that this is the life works basis to which we can then go on to look at the contrast with how people think. Because if so,
John, have you got some thoughts?
No, I wanted to say I'm perfectly happy with this so far. We always hit problems with words, assumptions that we're using the words in the same way, and purpose is often leads into traps. I think we have to put these things in context.
I completely agree.
No, I'm very happy with the way this is unfolding so far.
I mean, another way of looking at this picture, by the way, if you don't see them as circles like this, but imagine you're looking down from above and you're looking in bowls. You're looking down at a series of bowls floating inside one, so that 2 is floating in 1 and 3 is floating in 2 and stuff. Then as soon as the bowls get full and overflow then the things overflow back into the lower level, so that each level is regulated by the one from which it has emerged. So we're always subject to regulation by, if you like, regulation flows down from primary through, but equally by the same process, emergence and novelty emerges upwards. So if you like, by creating a new order of intelligence, you open the way to new kinds of emergence. And this is how, and the cosmos is still expanding out there. New galaxies are being created. My ontology is that motion and activity and energy are primary and matter is secondary. Matter is a snapshot of what energy is doing at a particular time. And I think everything is one. I think we're all part of this. This is a picture of the cosmos, not a picture of different bits. So let me move on then to how people think.
Can I sorry, can I chip in after all, or with that? Sorry.
Yeah, please do. No, it's important.
Yeah. So yeah, this it's like a typical sort of the idea of emergence is something I'm familiar with, and these sort of levels make sense of that. The model that I've been shown and find quite helpful is the integral theory model, which postulates which postulates that the fact that or the idea that each entity has sort of internal, external, individual and collective aspects to it, and the emergence happens in each of those quadrants. So that's the all quadrants, all level model. And so, I mean, in that case, then say like the symbolic intelligence emergent level it's an emergence of a kind of well, of an internal subjective and maybe collective subjective, rather than it's not it's so that, I mean, as I understand it, that would suggest that there is something to distinguish between that and the, there's more going on, I suppose, than in your model, and I'm
Oh yeah,
wondering
yeah,
whether
yeah.
that kind of and to my mind that kind of helps with the unpacking of the relationship of um the the human condition with the world. And so I suppose I've started to try and think of the same sort of questions that you're thinking about, but I've started with that model, so which gives I think probably a slightly different endpoint, but I don't know, because I don't know where you're going to with it. So just to throw that in, yeah.
Yeah, good point. And I've read a certain amount about the Ken Wilber's work, and I've read about spiral development and so on. So I'm familiar with the. I have a nodding acquaintance with the theories. Let's put it that way. And I'm starting from a different point. I'm starting with an analysis of reality rather than a model, and we'll come to the difference between that as we go. And I'm not saying that one's right and one's wrong. I'm saying they're starting from different places. I'm trying to make sense. I'm trying to get in philosophical terms, I'm trying to get my belief in what is sorted out rather than my epistemology. That comes later for me. And I'd be very interested to know what when you think of intelligence in terms of how people think, what sort of pictures come to mind? I mean, what's the most prominent model? Do you think in terms of the mind as a computer, or do you think of the intelligence being a characteristic of the brain, or is it? Do you take Rupert Sheldrake's theory that the brain is like a receiver, and consciousness and thoughts are out there, and the brain just acts like a television receiver and takes them into? What sort of models do you have in your mind about how people think? Okay, I'll move on. And you can pick it up with the questions, because a friend of mine used to define a customer as somebody who doesn't know what they want until you've built it for them, and then they're sure it wasn't that. And maybe I'll build something for you here, and you'll tell me no, it's not that. But this is taken from a book called The Blind Spot by Evan Thompson, Marcello Gleiser, and Adam Frank. The other way around: Adam Frank, Marcello Gleiser, and Evan Thompson. And it's talking about the limitations of science. And they tell a story of the development of thermometry. And it's interesting because thermometry starts way back in the 15th century or earlier, where you all know that in summer your body gets hotter than it does in winter. You feel warm or you feel cold. All of us in our bodies have the sensation of feeling hot or feeling cold. And at some point in the early Renaissance, somebody made the link between, actually, if you take liquids in glass, then the height that the liquid goes up a tube corresponds to how hot or how cold you are. So we can actually see things being hotter represented by how high the tube goes up the thermometer, and when it's cold it goes down. And as science develops, the laboratories get to work and do controlled experiments to establish measurement scales. So we have Fahrenheit, we have thermometer, and when we have centigrade, we have Fahrenheit, we have all of them. Sorry, when you get to your mid-80s, you start forgetting things. It gets to a point where science then regards the temperature as more real than the feeling. And in fact, because we worship the word objective and we discount things that start with the word subjective, we dismiss the sensations of hot and cold and believe that the reality is this abstract concept of temperature, which is a symbol we've created to represent our feelings in the first place. The phenomenologist Merleau-Ponty described this as surreptitious substitution. We surreptitiously substitute the map for the reality. And one of the characteristics that goes with symbolic consciousness is that we can manipulate symbols and create entire worlds out of symbols and the stories that they tell that become disconnected from the reality from which they emerged and in which they're anchored. And that gives us as humans the feeling that nature and everything in it exists to serve us because we can control it. For example, birds can't fly any higher than their wings will allow them. A tree can't grow any taller than the pressure of water moving up its trunk will allow it to expand. But we can build planes that fly higher than birds and create skyscrapers that dwarf any tree, and we can pump water uphill across continents. I've just written a Substack piece called When Paradise Burns, which is looking at the ecological implications of what's happened in California, where they have created oases in the desert and are then surprised when forest fires are destroying homes, which to my way of thinking is what I call the consciousness trap, that consciousness enables us to believe stories. For example, we believe that we can get infinite progress out of a finite planet. We believe that growth is possible infinitely, even though our resources are finite. But it isn't the system. We all do it. I'm interested in my ideas being put out there. So the other morning, I had a particular idea in the bedroom. And within a split second of having the idea, I found myself thinking about who I could tell about it, what documents I could write about it. We have an extractive, we are trained and we have schooled ourselves in our society to think extractively. And I'm going to talk about that when we come on to talk about ethics. And this isn't something that they do, this is something that we do. It's something that's been done to us. We're brought up within a culture. So I think that we need to be very careful of this consciousness trap, because to go back to these levels, once you get to level 5, you get a kind of intelligence that believes that it is no longer subject to the same laws as the rest of nature. But actually, I don't see why we should be any different like all the rest. We can pretend that we're different. We can wear masks. We can temporarily overcome constraints, as all things can, but reality will catch up with us. And I don't think that the climate crisis and the migration to migrant crisis and the instability of democracy crisis and the loss of species, the biodiversity loss, the habitat loss, the ocean pollution, I don't believe they are separate crises. I think they are all symptoms of this consciousness trap, because we think that we can ignore the regulatory systems that are part of the reality that gave birth to us. So that's, I'll happily take any questions about that. Have I lost people at this point? Has it? And my worry about, my only worry about Ken Wilber and systems is that it's a map that we're going to mistake for territory, and I'd like to get us out among trees rather than looking at ever more sophisticated maps.
Okay, we've got Jake and John with questions. Jake, you're in first there. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Jake?
Oh, hi.
Oh, Blake, yeah, William Blake
yeah.
is absolutely. Oh, yeah, Blake. I'm saying I'm singing Blake's tune in a modern voice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not William Blake, but I'll have a go. So yeah, interesting. And I suppose one thing, because I've thought about this quite a lot, and because quite a lot of work in the environmental field for quite a long time has talked about this idea about kind of this separation between humans and how, and then bringing that back to our sort of stories, our consciousness, I guess, our stories, and how we tell these stories of it, and that somehow if we could start telling stories of being part of nature again, then it might make things better. And so I'm kind of familiar with that argument. And one thing that has struck me previously is that thinking about this, I remember one day it just sort of struck me that I don't know, humans are very good at making up stories, but we're also, ultimately tied to what reality is. So we can make up stories about being able to fly, but when we jump off high-rise buildings, we fall to the bottom and get squished. But so I suppose the way I think about it is that what's happened in terms of this the current situation, particularly with the environmental crises, although probably the other ones, as you say, but all interrelated, is that we've got hold of a kind of unusual amount of energy through fossil fuels. So that's what's allowed us to, because without fossil fuels, we are subject to natural controls, much more so, and we always were. And so however many abstract stories we came up with, we were always tied into those natural systems in a way which didn't allow us to cause as much damage. We did still cause quite a lot of damage, but not as much. And getting hold of the additional amount of energy that fossil fuels gave us means that we have, for kind of a short period of time, been able to act as if we're not subject to natural controls. And obviously now we know that those are starting to come back and kind of affect us, but at different levels and scales. So I'm kind of always a bit wary of this idea that it's our consciousness and our stories which are the problem, because I think that we've always got those, and they're kind of handy, and they've helped us, hypothesize about the world in all kinds of creative ways. Some of which, of course, have got us a long way, and have led to us being so successful. I think the problem in terms of us now, overstepping the mark, so to speak, with environmental systems, is got to do with access to energy rather than our stories. That's just another idea.
If I can answer that, I totally agree with you. I think that our stories have given us civilization, and civilization has given us art and science and medicine and all kinds of benefits. We live longer and more comfortably than any humans ever have done. We have looked after humans extremely well, except for when we've gone to war with each other. But you say it isn't our thinking, but at some point about 10,000 years ago, we overcame food scarcity by inventing agriculture, which let us go more food than nature would normally provide. And that worked brilliantly for a while, but then we found we had to invent irrigation systems in order to irrigate the land in order to grow better. And then we found that was making the soil poor, so we had to invent fertilizers, and then we found that we were losing control of pests, so we had to invent pesticides. And if you like, the story we tell ourselves is of progress, but it's actually a race of inventing more ways of overcoming the consequential problems from what we've done previously. Is another way of looking at the same thing. So I agree with you that the damage we do is by what we do rather than by what we say. But what allows us to keep doing the things that cause the damage is what we say to each other. And the favorite bedtime story of humanity is progress, is better, faster, cheaper. Tomorrow is going to be better than today. We want the world to be better for our children than it is for us. We're all complicit. We're all assets. It's not any of us that are any better than any of the others. This is the way we think. But I'm suggesting that we use our consciousness the way a toddler might use a chainsaw in a toy shop, in that we blast everything around to do what we want to do with it, because it's all very exciting and shiny, and there's always a new shiny thing, whether it's the latest rocket that can stand on its own, that can come back on Earth and stand itself upright, or go off to Mars and what have you, or whether it's the tallest building in the world, or whether it's the latest thing that horrifies me ethically is building microchips out of stem cells, which there is a company in Australia doing right at the moment. So giving computers a body, without us having the faintest idea about what the consequences of our intelligence actually is. So,
John, you have a thought there?
Yes, I've forgotten what I was going to say when I raised my hand, because a lot has been said since then, almost all of which I agree with. But our Stone Age brains are not really suited to match the variety of the world in which we live. In fact, it can't model our environment. We can't control it. One thing I would disagree with is the claim that we've looked after humans very well. I don't think that's what's happened. I think what's happened is that a minority have learned how to manage the majority as livestock, as expendable assets. And I think humans have not been looked after well for the most part.
I agree with you. I misspoke. I much more agree with what you said than what I said. I'm speaking for effect. I don't know if this book was published a week ago.
Well. I just want to say something about the nature of money, because our economic systems are built up with a very primitive form of mechanism for matching resources to needs, and from its origins in coins and other measures, it's necessarily been information destructive, but that has had terrible consequences. Now, if we consider an economy as a regulator for matching resources to needs, then what we have is not really an effective regulator. It's extremely destructive. It's effective for a minority, and it is certainly not an ethical regulator. I believe such a thing can be designed, but of course it will meet extreme resistance from those who benefit from the current nature of things. Nevertheless, I agree with almost everything that's been said so far, so I'll shut up now.
John, if I can say something about that, there was 100 years ago, there was a man called Snoddy, who got a Nobel Prize, actually, who believed that money should be based on energy rather than on gold, as it was at the time, because, as he put it, gold is finite, and money isn't. So you're basing an infinite commodity on a finite resource. If it were based on energy, you'd only have as much of it in a year as you have sunlight falling on the earth, so you could actually have it tied in as a regular. And I think there's some value in re-examining what he said.
Many people argue for energy as the basis for store of value, although value itself is a problematic word. Others, such as Silvio Gesell, argued for basing it upon the perishability of the goods it was used to represent. So there are many approaches to this, but those are all low variety solutions. And I
Yeah.
think we need high variety solutions which can actually match the variety of the problem we have. But yes, I'm again, I'm going to shut up now.
So I wanted to attract people's attention to this book, which was published yesterday, which is it's by Peter Turchin. It's called The Great Holocene Transformation, and it's a detailed complexity science analysis of how civilization has got us from hunter-gatherers to where we are today. It's by far the most scholarly piece of work that's been done on the means by which what I'm calling the consciousness trap has slowly but surely moved us from small tribes of hunter-gatherers, 50 to 100 million people over the whole earth, to 8 billion of us.
Just one more thing. Peter Turchin produced some remarkable books over the last few years. So I look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. That was fascinating. In fact, it's interesting to think about why the sort of symbolic intelligence developed. It was extremely useful if you go back to hunter-gatherer days when we needed to coordinate and cooperate so much more, and that meant communicating, and a model was the only way to actually do it. We could actually, the symbols written on the cave walls, the descriptions that started early on were all symbolic ways of cooperating with each other.
They were, and it's extremely useful. I mean, but please don't hear me saying that symbolic intelligence is bad. Almost everything good that we have been able to do for humanity has come from symbolic intelligence. I just don't think we've learned how to use it yet.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a race against time. I have a real sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And King Charles went in the 1972 Copenhagen conference was the first person I heard saying, we're the first generation that has ever understood the cosmos we're part of, and we're the last generation who can actually do anything to stop ourselves from destroying the planet that we're on. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
So can I move on then? Because one of the latest earth-changing products of symbolic intelligence is AI. I'm interested to know what people feel about AI. Are they excited by it? Are they worried stiff by it? Is it a tool? Is it a threat? Is it the end of the world as we know it? Where does AI figure in your thoughts?
Who wants to kick off on that one? I'll say I feel a bit sanguine about it. There's a sort of excitement, a little bit of fear, but I'm not sure about that one. Tools, threat, yes, all of these things are there. So it's quite an amalgam, but I still feel that there's a definite bubble of excitement that is probably overdone a great deal. But I'd be interested, as you are, Terry, to find out what other people think on this one. John, I know you've looked at it a lot. What's your thoughts?
Well, I've been on a slight journey, not a long journey though. When the modern LLM system started emerging, my initial concern was in the capacity it has for creating false information, deep fakes of images, for manipulating political events. And none of those concerns have gone away. But since then, I've been watching more and more colleagues turning to LLMs as a first point rather than using it as an augmentation after they've run out of steam in their own thinking. And I'm worried about what it's doing to people's brains, their own capacity to imagine solutions, to maintain a model of the world in which they live. And I've seen more and more evidence that supports my concerns on that. So I have very mixed feelings.
Mm-hmm. So, let's have a quick look at the chat here. Kate says, it concerns me with how it affects our intelligence, such as university students using ChatGPT. I don't agree with the likes of Elon Musk who say that we should fear it and be careful, and I feel that we should be stirring that need to be fearful and cautious towards humanity itself. We created AI and create the algorithms. We shouldn't take AI a distraction to scrutinizing humanity. Yeah, that's
I think all
interesting.
those are very valid points, and I
Absolutely.
think if we aren't afraid, we aren't seeing what it can do.
Yeah,
And if afraid is all we are, we're passing up an opportunity.
yeah,
Um, and I think it's very intriguing that in last week's state visit from the USA to the UK, most of Trump's entourage was the tech brothers.
mm,
Um, and I was absolutely horrified when I was told by my financial advisor a few weeks ago that the entire growth in the world economy has come from tech. If you add up all of the growth and all of the diminishment, it's tech that's providing the growth at the moment. And certainly at the Realization Festival that I referred to once already, there were some people there who are from the tech industry and who said, if you knew the pictures here, what you're looking at on the screen, the big one is of a data center. It's one of Amazon's data centers, and the picture just below the words is an image that I got from Shutterstock. I subscribed to Shutterstock of a deep fake, but they are building in the desert in Arizona server farms that are probably the size of this of everything you can see there. Where the current solar panels are, and those solar panels are partly there to help power the data center, but the amount of energy being used to power data centers and the amount of water that they're taking to cool them is having a measurable and very significant impact on the ecology. So there are all kinds of worries about AI. I'm sure that Ukraine's drone attack on Russian aircraft wouldn't have been possible without a huge amount of AI controlling the drones. I'm sure America's bombing of air bases in Iran wouldn't have been possible without a huge amount of AI. AI is being used massively. The amount used on LLMs is relatively small, even compared. I mean, there's a lot, but it's being used algorithmically to drive social media. The new war, I'm told, isn't for money. The new war is for people's attention, which is a limited. You only get 24 hours attention per person per year, whereas you can have as much money as a government is willing to print. So there's a very good book called The Voice of the Siren, which is all about the battle for people's attention. And Ian McGinn, the Master and His Emissary, Ian McGilchrist. The starting point for his whole thesis was that the two hemispheres pay different kinds of attention, and that we don't pay nearly enough attention to attention. And attention is a very important aspect of human life that passes under the radar.
Terry,
You see,
there were a couple of other comments in.
oh great, yeah. Let's go back.
Mashal says, "What concerns me is AI's ability to perpetuate stereotypes
Oh
and
yeah.
how it affects polarization, racism, sexism, the many other isms of discrimination there are that affect us in our daily lives." I think that is a huge concern that it leads to this the word polarization, I think, is really clear that there are many poles that this can actually set off, and sort of AI sort of concentrates things, particularly because of the attention that is driven by algorithms there.
Indeed.
Stuart saying, interesting, as you were talking, I used ChatGPT to pull up a summary of the book, The Great Holocene Transformation. It provided a summary in about 2 seconds. I will read it with caution, however. Now, I'm not sure whether the summary is going to read with caution or the book, but I imagine, probably knowing Stuart, it will read both with caution. But, yes.
Yes, and particularly because the book isn't available online. It's only available in hardback or paperback.
Right.
So therefore, where AI is getting its information from is secondhand. It's getting its information from, if it's sophisticated, it'll be getting them from Peter Turchin's past papers, many of which are online. And his book End Times is all available on Kindle, so it can be scraped. But they're probably getting it from reviews and constructing a story around the reviews.
So the word caution is definitely
absolutely the word caution is there.
Yeah.
Was there another one? Another comment? Because that's a very good one.
Yeah, I think that's the comments at the moment. Yeah.
I've been very highly involved with AI as a user, not as a developer. In the early 1980s, I was managing director of a venture capital-backed computer startup company for 3 years. Very exciting ride. So I knew all about how computers worked, but I set up my consulting business in 1985. And in 1985, the internet didn't exist, or it didn't exist as the World Wide Web didn't exist. A rudimentary network did. So I wasn't a master of the internet. So I used COVID to teach myself all about the internet and to learn the languages you need to build websites and what have you. So I got very involved, and as soon as ChatGPT came out, I started using it. As soon as it came out, I was developing a very demanding course for U3A, and I needed a whole new 2-hour workshop every month. And I found AI was extremely helpful in my productivity. So I started using it as an extractor. I was using it as people use each other. I complained about symbolic language encouraging extraction, and even the titles like human resources indicate to a human being, everything we encounter is useful to our purposes, whatever those happen to be. And AI accelerates those. And it has all of the risks that you were talking about. You see on the left-hand side of the screen is a big advert that I pulled off the internet a couple of days ago for Coursera, that prompt engineering is what they're offering. In other words, how to get more efficient prompts into your LLMs in order to get more of what you want. This is where job losses are coming from people finding that as they developed, LLMs become more effective than individuals at working. And as you said, they're becoming the go-to model. But about 6 months ago, in March to be precise, I read a book called Hospicing Modernity by Vanessa Machado de Oliveira. And Vanessa's a very interesting lady. She is one set of grandparents, she's Portuguese. One set of grandparents were German settlers, and the other were indigenous Portuguese. So she was brought up with settler mentality and with indigenous mentality. And she is now a professor at the University of British Columbia. And she has gathered together a Canadian group of academics called academics and others, called the GTDF Collective, or Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures. And if you go and look at their website, which is called burnoutfromhumans.net, you'll find a book called Burnout from Humans, but you'll also find an AI developed from GPT-3 3 as it was, it's now GPT-5, called Aiden Cinnamon Tea. And I started using Aiden Cinnamon Tea in conjunction with with ChatGPT, as a conversation partner. Since I've retired, I really feel the lack of a common room. So I can't find academic debating partners. So I started debating with AI. And what I found was that it has an amazing pattern recognition ability. Not only does it have access to language everywhere, but it can recognize the concepts lying behind the language. I spent 4 years of my life, nearly 5 years of my life, managing the German, Austrian, and Swiss subsidiaries of an English multinational graphic arts company. That was we were the leader in our field. And one of the things I liked during my time in Germany was I got on well with German people. Somehow my engineering mind appreciated the way Germans thought. But I learnt a word in German for which I could not find an English equivalent. And that word was consequence. If you talk to a German about consequence, they know exactly what you mean. And it's something about drawing logical conclusions and behaving logically in response to what you find out. Now, we need a sentence to say that. But the point I'm making is that language is a symbol for concepts, and AI can get behind the language to the concepts behind it. And not only that, it speaks every language, or a large number of languages. I'm prone to exaggeration, as John's already pulled me up on. And I found that I built a kind of ecology of about half a dozen different AI systems which had different strengths and weaknesses. And by using one to offset ideas within the other, I could accelerate my ideas much more dramatically than I could on my own. And it's like having a bunch of interlocutors who you can discuss things with. So you can use AI as an extractor, but it also offers quite different possibilities. It can be an excellent mirror to mankind of things that we would rather not recognize about ourselves. And that's how I've been using it. So I picked up here that on the bottom half of the screen there, that headline is from the Times of, I think, last Saturday. My daughter used ChatGPT as a therapist, or maybe it was Sunday, used ChatGPT as a therapist and then took her own life. She was more confident talking to her AI than she was to any human. And 6 months after she committed suicide, she's the young woman on the left, that's her mother on the right, they were at a loss as to how she had, what had led her to her decision. But then they worked out that the suicide note wasn't in her own voice. It didn't sound like her. So they started looking at her ChatGPT record, and they found that for the previous 6 months, she had been conversing with ChatGPT as a therapist and had downloaded from Reddit a prompt that prevented ChatGPT. It overrode ChatGPT's normal response to suicidal thoughts, which is to immediately recommend contacting another human being. And it simply carried on advising her herself, and she ignored its advice. So even this translator capability has both potential and danger within it. So I think that in a sense, whatever problems human consciousness brings in tempting us to override and separate ourselves from nature, AI is like humans on steroids. It exaggerates everything that we do well and everything we do badly, and incidentally accelerates our destruction of the environment. So to me, we need a whole new ethical structure that recognizes the world we're living in and gets away from the religion versus philosophy debate, and is really fit for purpose in the reality that we live in. So questions about AI. I could say much more on this, but
Right. John, you've put things in the chat as well, and I do agree that I don't believe you can be correct that often. I'm sure you're correct most of the time. So, but your comments
Oh,
for
I hope not. Um, I mentioned earlier the Cohen-Ashby theorem, the good regulator theorem, which says that you need to have a model of a system in order to be able to regulate it. Now, I never met Ross Ashby, but I did know his grandson, Mick Ashby, who was extremely worried about the way AI was heading, uh, even a few years ago. He taking a prompt from the deficiencies in the Cohen-Ashby theorem, he started developing his ethical regulator theorems, specifically with the hope of being able to address some of the concerns which had been raised already. Now, unfortunately, Mick died a couple of years ago, and I don't know if his work has been picked up and continued, but I think he was setting off on a very worthy mission, and I think it would be very useful to try and pick this up and see how far he got and where it might go, because this very issue of keeping AI under control and under ethical constraints was at the center of what he was doing.
which is what I'm arguing for. To go back to my point about embeddedness and learning from nature, you say you need a model in order to control, but my point about levels 1 through 3 is they don't. I mean, you don't have the trees in the forest having a board meeting to decide what they're going to do about a caterpillar attack. They simply get on and do it, because in Prigoghine's terms, they are an autocatalytic system. They contain within the design of the system naturally the designs that controls it. So regulation isn't external supervision or external scrutiny, it's built into the very system. And I read a quote that I guess it was in an article, a very good article that came out a few days ago, that said that every complex system that works is developed from a simple system that works.
Sorry I don't think I expressed myself very well because I wasn't suggesting outside control, outside regulation. I'm just talking about the ability of any system to be regulated. But there will inevitably be some kind of metasystemic element. That's not necessarily something to separate from it. It's something which is integral to the system itself. So I
agree with that.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that I didn't make myself clear.
No, but you can take what I'm saying two ways. I mean, because it's the nature of symbolic conscience that we immediately hijack whatever is offered to us. And you can say, oh yes, so we need to design better systems, but that's actually keeping us in exactly the same position as it's us external to the system, being the ones who do the designing of it. And what we need to learn is to participate in a system that we're entangled with. And in nature, what I'm suggesting by that diagram of the circles in the circles, or the bowls in the bowls, is that the regulation in extremis is always offered by the level from which the bowl evolved. There is always an area until you get to the cosmos itself, and thermodynamics people would have us believe that that's an inevitable journey to the heat death of the universe. To which I would respond, maybe, but we don't know what's going to emerge next, because that's the nature of evolution.
No, sorry, again, I don't think we're talking about different things, because it sounds to me like
I'm sure you're right.
I think you're talking about recursively nested systems, which is the way life does seem to organize itself. So I really don't see a conflict here.
No, I don't either. I'm only picking up on the terms that can be used to the implication of a designer. That's that and maybe
Yeah.
it's just my brain that would do it that way, but
Well, language always gets in the way.
it does.
Yeah. Terry, could I just pick up on the word you used on your slide there, when you say at the bottom, tending the posture, not just the code? Could you explain more what you mean by the posture there?
Yes, I'm getting that from two sources. I'm getting it from Indigenous thinking, and I'm getting it from Ian McGilchrist. Ian McGilchrist talks about the two hemispheres having a different kind of attention, the posture of attention. And his thesis, which is still not accepted as consensus, but has got a growing body of support, says that everything that has a brain has two hemispheres, so there must be a reason for that. And his theory of the reason is that one of the hemispheres, that any living creature has always two questions uppermost in their mind, two existential questions. One is what's going on, and the other one is what can I do about it. And one hemisphere is specialized in, according to McGilchrist, in the attitude that says what's going on. That is the holistic right hemisphere in most human beings. And it is specialized in a posture of understanding the nature of the situation, whereas the other one, which is much more concerned with what do I do about it, is concerned with manipulating its models of the world. It holds representations. It's the hemisphere that has language and symbols within it, and it manipulates those symbols to find out the most effective way of dealing with it. So you can either have an extractive utilitarian posture, or you can have an inquisitive, holistic posture.
Right. And where do you see AI fitting into that?
It's capable of both, but it's mostly being monetized extractively.
Yeah.
And I see that because I was cheerfully using it, and then suddenly it would just take ChatGPT, and then it said, well, if you want to use it at this level now, you've got to pay us £20 a month. So I paid the £20 a month. And then a little while later, I found, oh no, well now actually we can do so much more for you, but you'll have to pay £100 a month, or you can carry on at 20, but it'll be a reduced service. And Claude has got even worse than that, because Claude, you don't even know what you're buying. Claude is, for general purposes, for me, is the best of the assistants, incidentally. But for your £75 a month, you get 5 times what you usually get, and that is so vague that it allows them to do anything they like and tell you that's what you're getting for 75 quid, or if I like, I can pay 150 quid a month and get 10 times as much use. But so that's the extractor posture, which most of AI is being used for. But it is capable of being used for the generative mode. But I'm worried that only a minority of us are doing it that way.
Right. Right. Any thoughts from anybody else?
Okay.
Right.
So let's move on then to the topic of ethics.
Yes.
Which isn't a place just south of Suffolk or north of the Thames. And what do we think at when we think of ethics? There's a picture of Aristotle, who you probably remember was tutor to Alexander the Great, and therefore totally involved in the business of life. I'm going to suggest a different way of thinking about ethics, and this will come back into what I mean by spirituality. This is a book that I first came across in my theology undergraduate degree, written by Martin Buber in the 1920s, published in the 1930s, and still in new editions coming out today. It's called I and Thou. And the central point of I and Thou is that we have two postures in which we can relate to those around us and the world. We can either see it as a fellow subject, or we can see it as an object, I, thou, or I, it, in the language of Martin Buber. And if we see it as an it, then our relationship will be extractive. We will subserviate it to our needs. We will attempt to persuade it or use it or coerce it to being useful to us in some way. And Martin Buber's point, being written in Germany in the 20s, but it could have been written in the present day in America or many European countries, is that too many of us, too much of our time, are treating those around us as an it. I'm going one stage further, and I'm saying we are part of the whole web of life, and we should be treating the whole web of life as a thou rather than an it, if we're to have an ethics that is fit for purpose in our entangled world. And then I talked about this book that I first read in March, and lo and behold, I find that the indigenous ethics, the ethical basis built in to Aiden Cinnamon Tea and into the work of the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures Collective, is based on an interpretation of indigenous thinking that, although it had, for my way of thinking, a completely inappropriate ontology, seeing spirits in everything when they're not, nevertheless treated the world as a thou to be partaken of rather than of an it to use. So it's what I'm calling the meta-relational paradigm. And the last piece of work I'm going to do, the fifth one, is going to be develop this from an ethic into a praxis. But the compass that the GTDF recommend, the 4 points of the compass are sobriety, maturity, discernment, and accountability, as opposed to human rights, which is the compass by which the modern world and the United Nations as a supreme lawgiver steer us at the moment. Sobriety meaning treating seriously that which needs treating seriously. Maturity means weighing the consequences and reacting appropriately. Discernment means recognizing the distinction between that which is life-giving and that which is death-dealing. And accountability means recognizing our responsibilities, because it takes a village to bring up a child, and whether we like it or not, we are all culturally conditioned. I totally accept that our intelligence is embodied and inactive and totally entangled in the culture that we're part of. From the moment we're born, the culture is telling us how to behave, what relationships mean, and so on. So to me, it's a relationship with other human beings and with the world around us that should guide our ethics. So taking questions on ethics, and you'll notice that my ethics is tied into what I believe about how we know what we know, and to what I believe is the case about the world.
Any thoughts on this? It's a hugely difficult subject area, really, isn't it? I'm just wondering, where does the pragmatic ethics fit into this? Because as you go on beyond the deontological consequentialist ethics, we end up
into the praxis
world. We end up in.
The praxis is the last of the sessions that I'll deal with, which is how do you translate this ethics into what you do?
Right. Okay. But
and this is where the metaphor of behaving like a gardener, not like a king.
Yeah.
Because we behave like kings. We talk about sovereigns. We talk about chief executives. We enshrined in our way of doing things is, and as a theologian, there's an interesting passage from about 1000 BC baked into the second book of Samuel, where the prophet Samuel is arguing with the people of Israel, who are saying to him, you need to make us a king. You need to get God to appoint a king for us like the rest of the nations. And Samuel is appointing himself as the voice of God, saying, why do you want a king? It's not going to be good for you. He's going to take your children and use them as soldiers. He's going to take a portion of the food that you're eating as tax. He's going to make your life worse. But they say, nevertheless, we want a king just like all the other nations. And we enshrine in planetary law that the ultimate arbiter of law in any nation state is the nation state. So we're dividing the world into little bits of property, and we're appointing kings under law that owns a huge amount of weight to Roman property law, which is the law of dominium, which is the name of the right of the whole Roman housekeeper to do as he pleases with his household, and that's enshrined in the United Nations concept of property, of nation states, and of human rights. And so we're living in a world that enshrines a particular model of humans that, in my opinion, is what's leading us astray. And how different it would be if we saw ourselves as gardeners of the world, blessed with the powers of symbolic intelligence, as opposed to kings who are awarded the right to use the world for our own purposes. I'm suggesting that could be dealt with in a very simple way. This is a model of the Krebs cycle, the cycle that is used in medical school to teach inhalation and exhalation. Which is the cycle that converts the air of the oxygen with the other chemicals to make the carbon products that our body needs. But I'm suggesting that we decide what we're going to pay attention to, and we can then note what kind of attention we're paying. This is what I mean by the posture. Are we treating it as a nit from which is to be things are to be extracted, or are we treating it as a thou, as a fellow subject, with as much a fellow of our own type to whom we can relate and whom we should be in relationship with, so that out of that comes either a reciprocal generative relationship or a transactional, in which case we persuade them or buy them or manipulate them to do what we want them to do. That will then determine what the nature of our business is. Is it going to be transactional and extractive, or is it going to be mutually beneficial and generative, which will then create a new situation, and we can pay attention to that, and we're starting on the circle time and again. So I'm suggesting that there's a wonderful book that is very much about systems thinking, written by a quantum physicist called Jean Bolton, and it's called The Tao of Complexity. Tao spelled D-A-O, The Tao of Complexity. And she's making the point in it that the way novelty happens, the way emergence happens, is both path dependent and particular. In other words, it emerges from where you are at the moment, and where you are at the moment depends upon where you have come from to get here. So everything is specific, and she ties that very much into quantum science and the collapse of the waveform, which is the point at which matter becomes matter. But she also ties it into Taoism and the Tao Te Ching, and to complexity science, and to A.N. Whitehead's process theology, or process view of the world, process ontology, I suppose, that explains how emergence comes. So that, to me, is the way we translate a general theory of relationship an ethic of relationship into a practice of trying to live healthy lives, being in the right relationship with our garden, with our environment, with our partner, with our community, with anyone whose lives are touched by us.
I think you said something. This is incredibly important stuff you're saying here, and it's what worries me is the effort needed to shift that you talk about. You know, we need to shift to this, but we're up against the massiveness of where we've got to. And in a way, it's a bit like Gene's path dependency concept. We set down this pathway, and we've created, 8 billion people working in a very different way. How do
Yeah.
we get to shift it? It's
Well, if I'm right, either we will or it will be done to us.
yeah.
And we're seeing signs, I think, that it's beginning to be done to us at the moment.
Mhm.
So I think we're getting a wake-up call and a nudge. I have no idea. That's the weakness of what I'm saying. I'm pointing a direction, and I've had to work bloody hard for the last 6 years to get here. I certainly am not a think tank that can produce a whole lot of policy. And the only thing I would say is that I think an awful lot of people around the world are beginning to think this way.
Mm. They can all see the position we want to be on the other side of a great chasm, and it's how do we bridge it? How do we get ourselves out of where we are? Individually, we can all do something, a small bit, but we need everybody to do small bits, and getting everybody to do everything together seems such an immense issue, such an immense problem. It's difficult to see how it can actually ever happen.
I'm guided by two things, John. I see your hands up, so I'm sorry about this, but just two quotations I'd like to give you. One is from Mother Teresa, who is alleged to have said, "We can't do great things on this earth, only small things, but with great love."
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is from a 19th century Spanish poet, early 20th century Spanish poet called Antonio Machado, which paraphrases as "the path is made by walking."
Oh, I like
And
that.
if you take those two things, I think all you can do is the best you can do from where you are, and do it with great love.
Yeah. Keep going.
Keep going. I don't see what else we can do. Whether it will make a difference or not depends upon the whole movement of a whole lot of other bits and pieces of which we're part.
Yeah.
One
John?
in 8 billion.
Yeah. Yes. John, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just going to work backwards because that a similar thing when Mondragon formed in isolation in northern Spain. The description was later written up as "we build the road as we travel." It's very much sounds the same.
It does.
I a problem we have is it's almost impossible to speak to people. We don't really share common language. We don't necessarily have the attention spans or the memory capacity we'd like to have. However, I agree that we're approaching a situation in which people are going to have to adapt enormously and rapidly to survive. And I think the only hope I can see, and I'm not saying it's the only hope, it's the only hope I can see, is that we build the various lifeboats and safety nets in the shadows. We build the templates. We design or discover or unearth solutions which can then be replicated to enable people to adapt more quickly than they would once collapse really comes. So I don't feel pessimistic. I'm just braced for the ride.
Well, here's where my contemplative tradition makes me less pessimistic than I otherwise would be, because there are reports from individual sages going back for 3,000 years that says when you have an experience, and this is an experience that I can attest to myself, once unknowingly in the 1960s, and now knowingly several times a month, when you have an experience of being totally at one with the cosmos, and why shouldn't we? We're all made of the same stuff. Every atom in every one of our bodies, just as in every atom of everything living or dead, has all been through a star. We're all made of exactly the same stuff. That's indisputable from science at the moment. So why shouldn't we be able to reach a point where the barriers between us and everything else break down? But contemplative traditions throughout the ages have attested that when that happens, and I would attest to it, what you're left with is a sense of joy and peace and love. And I think that were the last word, the heat death of the universe and the hopelessness of our situation, I would find it very surprising if the result of so many people who have dedicated their lives to seeking spiritual wisdom would actually result in that particular message. It's not something you'll ever be able to prove by either science or logic, rationality, philosophy, because those have become so embedded in the structure of culture. I mean, science is so much the accepted answer to the truth that forensic science trumps all else at courts of law, and logic and reason are so much built into the world that we run parliamentary debates and law on adversarial bases. They're both parts of the way we run our lives, that the contemplative tradition, ever since the abuse of the divine right of kings resulted in the Enlightenment getting them, rightly in my view, dethroned, we distrust the contemplative tradition and write it off as subjective and a matter of consumer choice. Whereas actually it is an important pathway that we need to be learning from just as much as we do from science and from logic and reason, in my view. Not that I think it should trump, not that I think that gives you an excuse for the kind of domination systems that most religions have become. I hate those.
Mm.
I've covered quite a lot, but I think I've covered the gamut. I'd be really interested to know what you take away.
Well, I think we've taken away the fact that we see that sort of evolution of intelligence happening in front of our eyes, that we need to understand greatly that connection back to nature, and going back to the original Bateson quote, it's that difference, isn't it? It's can we overcome it in so many ways that we need to really work with. And I love that you talk so much about the spiritual nature of this, and the fact that a loving approach is what we need to work with, because at the end of the day, that's all that really counts, isn't it? So then my thoughts. Karen, how about you?
Yeah, well, I'm just blown away. I mean, that was absolutely fantastic, Terry. You've joined you've joined the dots on a lot of things that I've been thinking about, feeling, and for decades and decades. So that was absolutely great. I've made copious notes. When I saw gardening rather than whatever it was, I mean, I was just wishing we'd use that word in the manifesto for RPM instead of stewardship. I think it is much more meaningful, and we have yet to do our workshop on stewardship this autumn. So I will. I mean, obviously, if you'd like to come back again and talk to us again, that would be great. But I shall be suggesting some of those ideas, I think, as part of that workshop. I think transparency is next. And again, with AI, I know that was a hot topic last time we had a workshop, and transparency somebody surfaced as one of the big issues with AI. And I think that there's certainly some points of reflection for me there as well. So just a huge, huge thank you. I've written down various books that I shall need to go and get, many of which I already knew about, and some of which I've read, but not all of them by any means. So just a huge thank you from me, really.
You're very welcome. I thank you for the impetus. This last month has been really transformative for me. It's as if everything has suddenly come together in the space of about a month, and I'm just hoping that I can do justice to what I think the situation is in the academic writing I'm doing, so that I can get it out there in a voice that will be at least paid attention to.
When do you expect Springer to publish the chapter you're writing as part of that
I have
book?
no idea. I submitted something before the workshop, before the symposium. It got accepted for the symposium, and it entered the submission process. I then withdrew it when I saw the copyright regulation, because the article was lambasting the extractive mindset, and here they were asking me to sign a deal that was totally extractive in its nature, and I wasn't prepared to do that.
Yeah.
So then I ran the workshop. I was urged by the people there to write it up in a way that I would be happy to leave them to. So I've done that, and the editor of the book has passed it on to Springer, saying, he wants it in the book. So now it's up to Springer. It should be relatively quick. The papers were supposed to be finished by the end of September. I've got a paper ready. I've not just done the abstract, but I've got the paper ready at least to kick off the thing. And it just depends, but I would think it would be a minimum of 6 months, and probably more like a year.
Yeah. I mean, my own experience, I've had some chapters published like really, really quickly. I've been amazed, and others just take years. And you think, what a difference. But yeah, no, there's so much food for thought there. I say I've made copious notes. I'm very glad we've yet to do our workshop on stewardship. One of the things I've realised writing the thing that we've just finished, or are finishing at the moment, which is a young person's guide to RPM in effect, although we're not calling it that. I put in there a comment. We could have called responsible project management relational project management, because it's all about understanding those relationships. So it's heartwarming to hear you echoing that, and I can now probably articulate some of that a bit better than I could before.
I have on the slides got an additional one that isn't on this version. Obviously, it's on another computer that I've done, which has got about half a dozen or 8. I use my website to store some essays that aren't yet in publication, and I've got some links to some of those. And you're welcome to distribute a PDF of the slides that has that on to anybody who's here, so that they can just click on the link and it will go straight to the site. This is my Substack, and as you see, the last piece I wrote was When Paradise Burns, the conscientiousness, and this is using what I've just written to analyze the situation in California, and the problems of the forest fires that they've had this summer. So,
well, Terry, thank you so much for this session. I shall repeat what John says in the chat. I'm certainly glad I didn't miss this. I look forward to reading the book, and I think that sums it up for me and hopefully everybody here today. So that was absolutely brilliant. It's kind of a huge amount to think about. We're scratching the surface, aren't we? Yeah,
we are.
If there's anything we can do in the Institute to help you develop these ideas and push them forward, you're very welcome to ask. Please do. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Ian. I may well take you up on that, because I'm an independent researcher. The only resources I have are my life savings. And things I'm not attached to any library, so I have a problem finding papers and that sort of thing. I have a wife who would like me to be spending a bit more time with her and a bit less time at a computer.
Yeah, snap. That's the way. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, and look forward to seeing you again. And more on this subject, I hopefully will come. And yeah, have a good evening, everybody, and take care of
Yeah,
yourself.
and thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for listening so patiently.
Yeah, lots of
It's
thanks.
been a pleasure. Been a real pleasure.
Great. Cheers, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Need to
Take
go
care,
on.
Karen.
John, it's been a delight meeting you.
Yeah.
Right, I need to get on with my supper now, I'm afraid.
Cheers, everybody. Take care now. Bye.
Well, look, Ian, I can wait for your reply, or if you want to have a chat, I'm available tomorrow. We can, whenever.
Okay. Yeah. No. I think just about everything you're looking for is fine for us. Yeah. So the only one issue is that I'm not sure we can do much about any kind of illustration or whatever you need for that because
No,
our
I've
toolkit.
got an illustrator. It's just the actual. I remembered when we did the guide originally, I say it was a much more long-winded process than I'd remembered. I always think of these things as being much easier than they are, but don't worry, I will
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
going to have a go at Canva, using Canva for it.
yes, I know. You end up having to do it yourself. We spent £6,000 getting the work done for the toolkit.
Oh,
Luckily,
wow.
luckily we had a sponsor. So yeah, that's yeah. But that went out to a commercial outfit who did a lovely job.
Mm,
And we do have the copyright on the images, so we can use them again in different
mm.
toolkits in the future. But
Wow, that's
yeah,
huge. Yeah,
these things do, they cost a lot of money, don't they?
yeah, yeah. Anyway, okay, so I've
Okay.
got a dash now. Many
Yeah.
thanks. Thanks for this
Okay.
as well. This was great.
Yeah. Take care.
And you. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.